Hey everyone, this is Martin Schneider, Constellation Research's resident growth strategy, sales automation, and all things CRM analyst.
And I'm Larry Dignan, editor-in-chief of Constellation Insights, and we're your co-hosts for episode 98.
Ooh, 98.
Which means we're going to get the 100th episode.
That's awesome.
Look out. And we're here to give you the latest news on enterprise tech. And then after news, I'll catch up with AI 150 member Matt Lewis to talk about mental health and how LLMs can apply to that. And then Martin will end it with a riff on ShortList.
That's right.
So for now, let's get to the news. All right, it's a whole lot of DeepSeek. If DeepSeek on earnings calls were a drinking game, it would be so much fun. Usually it's like the first question, second question, and it's in some tech vendor, but DeepSeek's even being asked about on enterprise buyer calls. And so what's changed here? DeepSeek has changed the whole conversation to really focus on value, price per model, price per performance, all that stuff enterprises are kind of used to talking about, but it all was, sort of forgotten in the AI rush. And now there's this weird thing where Amazon spending, $100 billion on capital expenditures. Some of that includes trucks and supply chain stuff too, but most of it's data center. And all Microsoft, Google, they're all just up in the ante on how much they're spending on AI data centers. And the question always becomes, well, if you can get cheaper models, you don't need all that compute. And the tap dance that's going on right now is one where cheaper models will mean that you do cheaper models will build demand. And so therefore, I need to meet this demand. So therefore, I'm going to keep spending heavily on AI factories. For now, it seems like Wall Street analysts are buying it. And that line of thinking works. But we know, like life, things work until they suddenly don't.
Right.
And I don't know when the don't comes, but it's been fascinating to see how this model from DeepSeek, which, by the way, I've tried it out on the web. I saw it work. I did this thing with AWS had this call, kind of walk through DeepSeek.
Yeah.
And compared it. They ran it through a rubric and they compared it with other models. I gotta tell you, DeepSeek didn't look that great. It got wordy. It went into these like long explanations. And it needed to be fine-tuned. There's also all these T and C's about it. So the biggest thing is that, if you're on the web, whatever you type in is going to China on their systems. Now, if you download it and run it locally, or you do it through your friendly neighborhood hyperscaler, like Azure, AWS, or IBM, I think they're the three that allow you to custom import that model. You can tune it and play with it and all this other stuff, but it seems like a whole lot of hubbub for a model that has some interesting techniques. But really, do I see this thing winding up in an enterprise use case? The answer right now is no. But I do think the techniques they used, very interesting, but it's come up on every earnings call. And it's fascinating to watch because this thing was out for a week or so before anybody even caught on to it, and it raised this big stink. It's really been weird, but now the hyperscale, everybody has to talk about value now, which long term, that's a good thing.
Absolutely. It's kind of an interesting where you wouldn't think transitioning to a moving up market CRM and front office applications with a little bit of back office provider like Zoho would actually be a very kind of tied in transition and segue. But spent a few days with Zoho recently and looking at what they're doing. For years they started talking about, we're building infrastructure, we're going to host everything kind of on our own, we're creating a whole environment. And a few years ago people said, why? That is so head scratching because there's Amazon, there's Azure, there's all those things, right? Fast forward to today and fast forward to talking to them this week, and it all kind of plays out. they're announcing their own Zia agents. They're forwarding an AI strategy. They have a bring your own model, multi-model approach that can all be run with data and privacy securities at scale, or whatever you want to do with it, at a cost now that can be really, really compelling versus trying to do it with some premium CRM providers, premium ERP providers, doing it in public clouds against, public models, and then trying to rein all that in and build out the security. So it kind of really starts to make a lot of sense now. So when you look at what they've been doing around a kind of, compared to some of the other more well-known, let's call them CRM and front office and apps providers, kind of slow walking AI a bit. It's been more that they've been setting up a really smart foundation and being really intentional as part of a general upmarket enterprise play for them, building out the infrastructure, building out the partner and global systems integrator relationships, and now building out data lake houses, which is, that mixture of a data lake and a data warehouse. So again, they can provide much more accurate, to your point, effective and efficient results at a better value point. Kind of exciting to see how Zoho, who went from being like a really great alternative in an app space and had like 60, 70 apps, to actually becoming an enterprise platform. They talked a lot this week about platform and domain like areas of kind of like, let's call them, almost like solutions. They never really talked about solutions before, but now they're starting to get into vertical and domain specific solutions. Instead of just having an app for this, it's like, here's our collaboration cloud. Instead of just having some CRM apps, here's our CX cloud, right? Getting really exciting for them to really pull that stuff up market, aggregate a lot of their capabilities and apps into full solutions, powered by really strong data infrastructure, really strong cloud infrastructure that they own, as well as now easy to use, but then really flexible AI tools that can really change the game for mid-market companies looking to be differentiated without having to spend premium pricing. So the value concept is bleeding into everywhere, right? And I think this stuff was happening before DeepSeek, and DeepSeek, I think, is just really starting to kind of ring that bell a little bit and show that the way we were doing it first, it's first mover disadvantage in a lot of ways, right? So right. It's exciting seeing how that's happening, right?
Well, I think the most interesting thing about Zoho is just the value of it.
Yep.
Which, it's that 1/10 of cost sort of thing. So, and they are moving upstream to mid-market and enterprise. And the milepost for Zoho, at least what I'm looking at, is, those integrator kind of things.
Yep.
Large enterprises. Can they get one large enterprise who dropped a bunch of apps for Zoho and saved a ton of money? Like that's kind of the question. Can Zoho scale to those companies there. With 50,000 people in them?
They're there. They have, yeah. And I think, when you look at like Zoho People, right? Is that a really banged on app when you look at like HR stuff? Not necessarily, but this company that's perceived as an SMB product has 2 million employee deployments. You know what I mean? So there's got to be logins for that. There's
yeah.
So, that's 2 million people, like giant companies in Asia that are leveraging parts of the Zoho platform to do some really high scale things. They've got big enterprise companies. Their biggest issue is perception and awareness, right? And the perception is SMB, and people aren't aware of those enterprise customers. They got to push them forward, right? Because that's their story. They've got a lot of that stuff. It's enterprise ready. It's ready for prime time or whatever you want to say. They've just got to tell a better story for that. And I think the time is now. I think 2025 is going to be a big year for them to make an impression, because they've done a lot of the hard work and the foundational elements in the background. Now it's coming out in spades. And I think it's going to be a really cool year or two for them as they, I think, start to impress a lot of CIOs that probably wouldn't have thought of them before, as we start to get into this reevaluation stage of like legacy products, SaaS, not cloud products. AI needs to be easier and less costly. Zoho is going to be an alternative there, like you said. That what do we call it? Exponential value creation that they provide there.
Yeah, and I think they can do very well. They're already doing very well, but they can do very well in the mid market too. Like that's a lucrative space.
Absolutely.
But from my storytelling perspective, I kind of want to see that big enterprise that said, hey, we ripped out XYZ and went with Zoho.
Yeah, 50,000 users on Zoho One would be that's
and I think we're closer than people realize.
No, absolutely.
It's going to be and it'll be a fun story to tell when it happens. So hopefully we'll get to tell it.
Yeah, I don't know when they're gonna, as a private company, they don't announce a lot, but they have an incredible amount of paying customers. It's almost a shocking amount when you look at even what like a Salesforce has, and even what larger providers that you know every day, the Snowflakes and others of the world, and they're starting to provide some of the infrastructure that some of those big companies do. So, man, it's going to be really interesting when people start understanding the size and scope and the scalability, reliability, and availability that they can provide, because they've done the hard work to do a lot of their own infrastructure. Seemed like a fool's errand before, but it's really, given the atmosphere now and what you need to do AI securely, successfully to scale without your costs blowing up. Really, really cool stories coming out of them, and we're just going to hear more.
Yeah, they're definitely a disruptor. Well, that's all we have for the news this week. Stay tuned for me and my interview with Matt Lewis of the AI 150. And then after that, Martin will come in with some ShortList riff. Hi, I'm Larry Dignan with Constellation Insights, and we're here with Matt Lewis. He is CEO of LLMental, a company that just launched. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
So I guess for starters, congrats on the launch of the company, and walk me through what your vision is, and what the master plan is.
So when we last spoke in the summer, LLMental had existed as a venture studio. We'd launched it in the spring of 23 as a kind of incubator of sorts to accelerate considerations out in the ecosystem that were progressing ideas and innovations really focused on the overlap or the juxtaposition between artificial intelligence and mental health. And there are a number of these considerations out there where entrepreneurs and visionaries are trying to find ways to kind of speed time to decision across the mental wellness and mental health environment. And we're fortunate to work with a number of individuals like that in the time from really like summer 23 to spring of 24. But we found that a lot of the groups were either too early stage to really benefit from the type of experience and counsel that the team could offer, or that a lot of the really kind of extant challenges, the kind of thorny problems, if you will, that exist out in the world were still going unsolved. And we recognize that in order to really kind of try to really add value into the environment, that it was going to require a different type of business model to really address those challenges. So we matured the business from this kind of venture studio model of investing time and effort and resources to accelerate other businesses, and transition from a studio to a kind of firm of the future, a modern enterprise, which is what LLMental has now become. So LLMental, instead of kind of investing in other businesses, is now kind of a business of businesses, all focused on the thesis of augmented mental wellness, which is the idea of really leveraging generative artificial intelligence to improve the mental wellness of people out in the world.
So does that mean like therapy, cognitive therapy, or I guess how does this play out, in the mental health space?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So we started by trying to first articulate what some of the challenges are that exist, that people have, and that they're struggling with today in 2024, and that they might continue to have over the next couple of years and into the kind of distant future, like say 2031. I think when you start looking beyond that point, it's kind of hard, at least for me, to imagine what life is like either here, in the States, or what it's like even on planet Earth. And maybe we've started kind of sending folks out to the moon or Mars or other places, but when you get past that point, at least for me, it's a little bit hard to kind of imagine what life is like. So we tried to kind of take a future forward look at kind of what life is like for humans, for people, and imagine what challenges they exist. So we drew up a list really of, there are 17 thorny problems or problems that people have that have perennially gone unsolved, that are all kind of blue oceans, or really kind of areas that don't really have any real innovation in them, and that could potentially benefit from a kind of first principles AI native consideration that could really add a lot of value if there was an offering in that space that added real consideration for people that struggle with those challenges. So, for example, in the I think you mentioned therapy in the space with individuals that have serious mental illness. Some people might find their way to therapy, and it provides some value. Some people might find their way to modern medicine, and they get on an SSRI like Paxil or Prozac. They might find their way into some other type of intervention. And there are a ton of companies out there that are trying to democratize access, trying to get people into more areas where they can see a clinician, like get therapy into someone's hands if they can't go see a doctor like in Manhattan or in LA or in Chicago, for example. And that's great. You need to do that work. But there are so many of those types of organizations already doing that for us, it wasn't one of those like high priority challenges to try to tackle, because there are a number of organizations already doing that work, and being the 51st or the 108th organization in that space to us was not attractive. The area that we tried to kind of focus on would be incremental to that, if you will, that could help really kind of provide some consideration, some novelty that has not yet been explored.
What are some of those areas?
So in serious mental illness, the conversation has historically been really over the last, say, 60 years on harm avoidance, in trying to avoid really bad outcomes, terrible outcomes for people that are suffering. And think about, say, depression as an example. In this country, there are about 3 million people that are diagnosed with depression, and globally about 300 million. Most of the modern medicine infrastructure, whether it's in psychiatry or psychology, primarily exists to ensure that people that get into therapy or get into modern medicine have some type of response to their treatment, that they benefit, that their mood, their affect, it gets better, and that they lessen the likelihood of harm. That is, that they're less likely to die by suicide. And it is essential that people that are suffering don't die by suicide. I definitely don't want to downplay or minimize that conversation at all, but it is the case in almost every setting. And in my previous role as chief AI officer at Inizio Medical, I led a number of launches of pharmaceutical, medical device, neurotech, digital therapeutics products in mental illness. It's often the case that that's where the conversation ends. Like if you can prevent people from dying by suicide, in most conversations, the clinician, the care team, the individuals themselves, like that's what good looks like, is not dying by suicide. And the conversation pretty much ends there. There really isn't the type of conversation that other therapeutic conditions, other diseases, other parts of the world tend to have, which is, okay, well, you're still here, you haven't died by suicide yet. How is your actual quality of life? What does your decision-making capability look like? And what are your social relationships like? How is your work setting? How is your relationship with your wife, with your kids, with your dog? Have you actually gotten back to the person you were before you were first diagnosed with depression? What's called kind of like getting into remission, if you will, or getting past remission to recovery. And those things, if they happen only kind of by accident. They're really not engineered to happen by the medical establishment, and there's really no kind of assistance for the person who's suffering to go from diagnosed to kind of design for recovery, or from kind of they're in the system and then they are in remission and they get to recovery as an intentional outcome. So our business in that space, which is called LLMental, uses generative AI and some machine learning as well to help people progress from diagnosis to remission and then ultimately to recovery, so they can build a life worth living that they otherwise can't get through traditional offers.
So is this a case of the model coaching and you check in every day, or I guess how does it work in practice? You're diagnosed, you're not committing suicide, and then you're talking to a model over time and check-ins. I guess how
it work? That's definitely like a supernatural question to ask. It is an everyday engagement, but it's not talking in the sense of like talking to ChatGPT. I think if you think about mental illness or kind of diseases of the brain, as a kind of a general class, it's kind of like taking a first principles approach is very helpful, like taking, you know, a beginner's mind, child's mind approach. And there are a lot of things about the way we treat these conditions now in 2024, or even, you know, fast forward in 2028, when most of the world will be using generative AI, for example, when adoption is more robust than it is at present, that just don't make a lot of sense, like, at all. That make no sense at all. They made sense, but perhaps in like 1900, when Freud first kind of came up with the idea of psychiatry, or in the 1960s when we took people out of the mental institutions and kind of brought them into the community. But they really make very little sense now. And like the one thing that makes almost no sense at all to us as a founding team of this mental business is that if you have depression, it's at least in the US, you'll probably see your psychiatrist maybe once every 3 months for about an hour. You'll see maybe a therapist maybe once every 6 weeks for an hour. So that total time with a clinician adds up to about 24 hours per year, or maybe about 1 day of every 365 days. And the other 364 days, you're literally left alone, unsupported, with no engagement, no resources, no information, nothing. You're just in your head, torturing yourself all the time. So for 99.1% of the time, you're alone. And for 0.9% of the time, you have something, someone, somewhere. So RhythmMental is really designed to be kind of like a co-pilot for your mind that can help you architect the life that you're meant to live when you're in your mind the 99.1% of the time. Not a chatbot per se, but something that helps you kind of scaffold the types of interventions or activities that are helpful and peer-reviewed, evidence-based, that lead to improvement in your quality of life, so you can get back to being the person that you're meant to be. It's more like a kind of Spotify, if you will, or Pandora, depending upon which side of the music spectrum you're on, that creates a playlist of things to do, activities or interventions, experiences, if you want to call them that is highly curated, hyper-personalized, and tells you as the sufferer what's right for you on Tuesday morning at 11:17 on December 10th. That might be different on Friday, December 12th or 13th, because the weather's different, or it's sunny out, or you don't have work that day, or you're with your family, and the types of considerations and contextual considerations are going to be completely different. So it's, you know, really a platform that makes sense for the world we actually live in today, as opposed to when psychiatry was first invented, 120 years ago.
So how does the prompt work? Does it basically you set up an app and then it gives you suggestions in the morning? I'm just trying to figure out the engagement model.
Yeah, it's not a prompt. It is a native platform that we have already built, and so people can't come into the platform unless they are diagnosed with depression. We have a handshake with a medical record firm that validates that someone actually has diagnosed depression. Otherwise, they're not welcome into the platform, and that's both a safety and a trust consideration, so that people that are in the platform know that they're only involved and talking to other people like themselves. That it's a big challenge in the mental illness community, that people feel like they're alone. That this is a real kind of declaration that they are not alone. But also when they're talking with each other, with other humans, that they're only talking to people that have their best interests at heart, that are facing similar struggles. They're not with people that potentially trying to take advantage of them or exploit them or do things that are unhelpful. So it's a validation that they're in the right place. And then they're getting a objective validation of where their world is, the types of responsibilities and challenges they have. Most of the kind of capture of what their world looks like is passive. They don't have to do very much to get a very highly curated, personalized version of what their life plan looks like, a kind of recommendation or kind of prescription, if you will. And then it contextually adjusts, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, based upon what their responsibility set looks like. Is it parental? Is it professional? Is it personal? What are they doing? And they can make some adjustments to it. But it's not an avatar. It's not a chatbot per se. It's more kind of a assistive consideration to help them figure out kind of what they should do and when they should be doing it, so that instead of getting trapped in like doom scrolling on social media, which is not helpful, they're doing things that are useful for their mind and for their other relationships that help them progress forward and kind of build that like 10% improvement every day.
So what does the underlying tech stack look like?
Yes, that's a good question. So we started building the early generative stack in the platform that exists at present. And so it is an AI native platform, and just like Netflix or now Spotify has kind of become AI powered. Most of the major platforms, the recommendations that someone gets served up are machine learning driven. So they're informed by past practice as well as by the literature in terms of what works for them and what's relevant. We have almost 2,000 experiences, interventions, and activities that have been curated at this point. And those things fall into three large constructs, which are people, that is like the social interaction someone has with their neighbors, their friends, their family, their coworkers, their religious community, people that are actually in their life, if you will. Their place, which is largely like their home, their place of work, their place of worship, their neighborhood, things like that. And a lot of it has to do with like Maslow's hierarchy, so like whether they feel safe and secure. And then the third area is around their purpose. So do they feel that they're contributing their voice to the world? They have meaning. What do they? Why do they wake up every morning? What is their kind of role in the world, if you will? And all the interventions kind of ladder up to those three categories. The categories are not things that we created as a team. They come from the literature, and they were talked about extensively in a book that Tom Insel, who used to be the director of NIM, the National Institute of Mental Health, published about 3 years ago, called Healing was his book. And he after running NIM for over a decade and spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money, he kind of admitted in this kind of come to Jesus moment that a lot of that money didn't really add a lot of real meaning or help to people that were suffering with mental illness, that they learned a lot about how the brain worked, but it didn't really change people's lives. People were still suffering just about the same as when he took office. And that he realized after being in the role for almost 12 years that what really changes mental illness is this kind of social cure, this mix of people, purpose, and place. And in all the years since leaving him, Tom has stood up a number of startups, mostly focused on doing the same type of thing, but in the community, leveraging technology, but helping people in the community. We're doing the same type of thing, but leveraging artificial intelligence. So it's a established framework for how do you help people that have a biological disease, mental illness, progress forward with a social cure.
So you're training the models with the medical literature?
That's right.
Okay. What's the base model, and do you anticipate swapping that out? Like if there's another latest greatest model, I mean, Google has, I think it's Palm LM or something like that.
Yeah, it's built on 3.5 initially, for a number of reasons. Some that were opportunistic, some that just made sense for kind of where the initial kind of descriptions of the class were. So we're using this part of generative primarily to help people build self-efficacy, that is, get to a place where they can understand why the thing they're being told to do is relevant for them. And generative sings in this space. Generative is exceptional at this. So people are always kind of struggling. I know you have this conversation with a lot of other AI experts that talk about use cases, like what's the use case for AI in finance, what's the use case in life sciences, what's the use case here. But this is an amazing use case of generative, is that depending upon who the user is on the other side of the platform, it does a great job of helping them come to terms with at what stage of change they are in the readiness adoption paradigm, coming to meet them at their level, and then talking to them at a level they can understand so they can internalize it and get ready to actually do it in their life. And I don't know a single technology that does this better than generative. And 3.5 is actually quite good at this. The later models have other benefits as well, but just as we're a small team, we're still building, we're still trying to evaluate what the right path is as we kind of go to market and scale up. But it's really a summarization and a contextualization for the person that is dealing with a number of challenges. And I think, while everyone that's in the space is rational, there are a number of cognitive challenges of being depressed, for example, that make it difficult to make decisions. And we're trying to help improve those by improving someone's quality of life. But it's not uncommon for someone with depression to have what's called brain fog, where it's, they get a little bit confused or hard to make decisions, or to have executive dysfunction, have memory problems. So you don't want someone that has challenges thinking to have to go through 80 pages of literature. or to have to go through 40 PowerPoint slides, or to have, excessive content or copy on an infographic. You need it to be really simple and easily understood and annotated and evidence-based and referenced. So they say, okay, I'm going to take a 20-minute walk in the woods by myself without any other people or my dog. Here's the reason why. Here's the literature that supports it. Here's the benefit that it's going to accrue to me in the next 5 minutes immediately following. And here are some ways I can contextualize it to make it relevant for me. Maybe I can use my AirPods, or I can listen to my phone in my pocket. I can put a track on. It's going to help me understand the birds in this environment, blah, 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 whatever it is. Generative does that exceptionally well. And so these are like kind of red thread considerations where it helps bring the platform to life. But if we're doing our job right, the user doesn't really see the AI. It kind of like helps make the platform work, but it's not really visible to the average person.
Yeah, great stuff. Anything I didn't ask that I should have?
Yeah, so that's half the business. That's the kind of serious mental illness side of the business. The other side of the business is on the enterprise side. So if RhythmMental is B2B2C, it's focused on people that are suffering with serious mental illness. The other side of our business is on the B2B side. It's called TransferMental, and it's focused on really workplace well-being. So any organization, really, although we're really looking at organizations in health and life sciences, since that's where we've worked for most of our career, that are trying to adopt artificial intelligence for the most part, which is the major kind of transformation challenge of the day. And your groups, people you've spoken to, I've been doing this work for years, have the best intentions with trying to adopt AI in the modern enterprise. But truth be told, it's not going very well in a lot of places. There are some standouts where those pilots and POCs do turn into scalable success, but they are exceptions. They're anomalies. There's many more failures than there are successes. And it is our thesis in the TransferMental business that a lot of the reasons why AI adoption is not succeeding is what the literature calls human factors. This is in the human-computer interaction space. The human factor consideration is almost entirely psychological. I'll tell you, when I got promoted from Chief Data Analytics Officer to Chief AI Officer at Nizio 2 years ago, I ran a town hall across the whole organization saying this was our thesis for augmented intelligence. It was humans and AI working together to do more than humans can do alone. Everyone's heard this kind of story by now across the group. I had a senior leader in the business in our UK office message me on Teams right after our town hall saying this sounds brilliant, but I'm so concerned that once you do this, you and your boss are going to come to me 8 months from now and lay off half my group, and I'm going to lose my job. And he's like, you're pretty much doing this, but you're saying robots are going to take my job. And it was the fear that he had was palpable. Like he was deeply concerned that by us being successful, he would be unemployed. And it was like, I've heard this kind of retort now hundreds of times from audiences I've spoken at, conferences, podcasts. This is like one of the biggest concerns people have. And in most transformation settings, it's not that I think that leaders in these businesses are malicious. They're not trying to hurt people, but I think they don't know what to say, and they don't know how to support teams that have anxiety. They have depression already. They're burnt out by very high workloads. There's a lot of pressure in the environment itself. And we've also seen when they are supported, when their mental health is robust, when they are mature and they have a mindset that's growth oriented as opposed to having a fixed mindset. I did a white paper with Connor Grennan, who leads AI at NYU last year, on this exact topic, that the outcomes for the business are significantly stronger. The success rates for AI adoption are much more robust when the organizational health is stronger. McKinsey has a lot of published work on this topic, that when the organization has a culture, a mission, a vision, and principles and values that they actually live by, as opposed to just put on the wall on a framed poster, they actually live by them and implement them. And when leadership communicates with transparency and dignity and respect, the organization is more likely to be resilient through change. And when they don't do that, lots of bad things happen. And TransferMental is really designed to solve for the mental well-being side of that equation, to help businesses recognize, hey, you spent $26 billion on generative AI adoption across the business, and 23 million has been wasted thus far. Why is that? So go before you spend another 50 million. Maybe we stand up an intervention to upwell, that is, improve the mental wellness of your group, so that maybe 80% of that spend is actually going to work. and people will adopt the platforms that you intend to put forward. And before you go spend another $50 million on building gender value native platforms that will be obsolete before they're built, we can make some better decisions and power forward for the future.
So it's all well-being when you boil it down. Thanks for joining us, and good stuff. I look forward to see how all this develops.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks to the audience for listening.
Hey, it's Martin Schneider with Constellation, here to talk about the latest round of shortlist reports that are coming out. As you know, we do these about every 6 months or so. The analysts, we look at our coverage areas and we put together these shortlists. Now, again, like we said, we kind of update them when they need to be updated, usually around once a year, but sometimes it's kind of offset. You know, the shortlists represent, you know, the kind of the outcome and the output of our discussions with the vendors themselves, as well as with end users. So it's kind of that bringing together of what end users are looking for. So we put together kind of threshold criteria of what a vendor needs to be successful in bringing their product to market, as well as looking at the competitive landscape, looking at the execution of some of these vendors, and how they're really, you know, how they're faring against that, right? So, you know, we really try to keep these as short lists, right? These are really great tools for early adopters, for people thinking of reevaluations and reimplementations, first-time implementers, to really kind of shorten the evaluation cycle, because we've done a lot of the hard work for you, right? Now, there's a lot going out. There's going to be dozens. Just to give you an example, just me alone, I'm doing one on strategic response management, which is those new AI-driven tools that help you to, you know, quicken the process of doing RFPs, RFIs, and just doing inquiries that your customers and prospects may have. You know, using generative and agentic AI to pull the information together to create really good responses, but also to kind of pull even RFPs together. You know, again, leveraging really cool workflow, really cool data, you know, things like that. Loyalty and customer management, you know, really how we think about customer loyalty. AI is changing the game there, because now we can aggregate a lot of customer activity and bring that together across, you know, a number of different channels and touch points to better understand what the customer needs, what the customer prefers, and both in B2B and B2C, really, you know, bring that to bear and create a much more affable situation where you're driving customer loyalty. A big short list that I'm updating this time, taking over from Ray Wang, is CRM mid-market suites. You know, we've got a really, you know, generative AI and agentic AI are absolutely changing the game when we think of, you know, how a mid-sized company thinks about their customer relationship management, their CX strategy. And what's great is that high composability of applications, the obviously the AI integration schema becoming easier, so that you can actually create a much more data-rich, intelligent, and functional, because these more modern user interfaces and the composability of interfaces being easier than before in no and low code platforms is really changing the game to build a much more bespoke and customized solution for a mid-market business, versus the old model of pretty much having to take the stuff off the shelf, configure it as much as you can in a SaaS environment, and doing the best you could with it, right? It's really a different world now. And there's vendors like Brevo and HubSpot and Keep, but then obviously there's a lot of, you know, legacy vendors like Microsoft Dynamics and NetSuite and Sugar CRM and Zoho, who are really kind of changing the game there and how they're building data-rich, workflow-heavy, composable UIs to bring more people into the equation for mid-market companies, to get value out of the system, and then drive a better customer experience every day. So that's just a few of the short lists that I'm working on. You know, the other Holger and Liz and Shirag and Andy, and you know, there's so, and Doug have a lot more too. So it's, you know, February. It is, you know, I guess you could say part one of the two-part seasons of shortlists. So make sure that you're checking out across social media. We'll be broadcasting a lot of the new shortlist winners or the vendors named to the shortlist, but also go to Constellation Research's website. There's a shortlist section there, and you can see all the new shortlists. Whether, again, if you're looking for a first-time implementation, if maybe your deployment's getting a little long in the tooth and you're looking to reevaluate, or you're just trying to stay on top of, if you're a vendor, the competitive landscape, but just to kind of learn what are the driving factors now in terms of roadmap and vision, and where the products are going across these dozens of new shortlists that are coming out. You got to check them out. So go to the website or check us out on socials. We'll be broadcasting those all over on LinkedIn, on X. So check it out. Thanks a lot. All right. Well, that is a wrap on episode 98 of CRTV. Make sure to tune in again. Catch us in 2 weeks.
And that's right. Co-host Holger Mueller and Liz Miller will bring you episode 99.
Wow.
In the meantime, follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter at ConstellationR, and at hashtag CRTV show.
All right. And don't forget to subscribe to Constellation Research TV over at YouTube, as well as subscribe to the CR Insights link over at constellationresearch.com. That's how you'll get all of Larry's thoughts and more on everything going on in tech with the newsletter. So make sure you're subscribed to that if you're not already.
And speaking of final thoughts, given Martin and I are both Eagles fans, we just want to say, woohoo, go Birds.
Go Birds. Yes.
Should we do something in case the Eagles win, and then do something in case the Eagles lose?
You guys are both big Eagles fans?
Yes, that's why we're almost bummed that we weren't recording this on Monday.
Yeah.
Well, you can make some references to it for sure in the intro.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't want any references
If they lose.
they lose. So
Keyword being references, because that's why they're going to lose.
right, and then we'll do the other one. And since Martin and I are just Eagles fans, we want to say Chiefs. No. And since Martin and I are both Eagles fans, we just want to say to your Chiefs, I don't know. I'm so sick of you people.
Exactly.
All of you. Patrick Mahomes, Taylor, Travis. Like,
Reason
enough. We're done.
It's enough. It's all
Done.
enough.
It's just
You
done.
know? Yeah.
So.
It's, well, you know what though? We're a team for the future, and Travis Kelce's 1,000. So
Exactly.
I think we'll see more Eagles and less Chiefs in games like this going forward. So,
And we're here to give you the latest news and then so that's all we have for the news today. Stay tuned for my interview with Matt Lewis of the AI 150, and we'll talk with And I'm Larry Dignan, editor-in-chief of Constellation Insights, and we're your co-hosts for episode. What episode is this? 98.
is it 98? All right.
Is
Wow,
it?
we're getting close
I
to
don't know.
100. I think our last one was 96. So I guess.
All right, so the next one's 100.
Wow, we get to
What
do
are we going to do for 100? Do we just have to shoot this all over at this point?
I think so. Yeah.
Let me blow up this font. So,
I went to go let the dog out, and then it seems like something happened. Did something happen while I was gone?
we talked about.
Dogs got out.
Man, this is a rough start, a slow start, I will say.
This is not good.
We were punchy before the game.
You know, at least some bloopers.
Pre-gaming. Let's go.
Yeah.
The longest 15 minutes of your life. Right
Yeah.
here.
Okay.
We could do this all day.